Dr. Elena Morgan, a humble and successful black neurosurgeon, returns to her hometown of Crestwood to fight against systemic corruption and deep-seated racism. She confronts Mayor Reginald Thompson and Officer Daniels, who misuse their power to suppress transparency in the redevelopment of Elmwood Park. As Elena uncovers evidence of their collusion with unscrupulous developers, she faces relentless smear campaigns and overt discrimination. Her unwavering determination to expose the truth ignites anger and controversy within the community, highlighting the pervasive racial biases and injustice that threaten to undermine her mission for a fair and inclusive Crestwood. The sun dipped low over Crestwood, casting a warm, golden hue across the quaint streets of the small town. Nestled between rolling hills and dense woodlands, Crestwood was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, and secrets were hard to keep. Despite its picturesque facade, the town bore the silent scars of systemic challenges and unspoken prejudices that lingered beneath its surface. At the heart of Crestwood stood Joe's Diner, a beloved local establishment that had been serving hearty breakfasts and comforting lunches for over 3 decades. The neon sign above the entrance buzzed softly, a beacon for early risers and late-night patrons alike. Inside, the diner was a tapestry of familiar faces and the comforting aroma of brewed coffee mixed with sizzling bacon. Seated in a corner booth was Dr. Elena Morgan, a woman whose presence commanded respect and admiration far beyond the borders of Crestwood. At 45, Elena had carved out a remarkable career as a leading neurosurgeon, her expertise sought after in major cities and prestigious medical institutions. Her wealth and influence were undeniable, yet she navigated her life with a humility that often left those around her in awe. Elena was a striking figure, tall and graceful, with tightly coiled hair that framed her face in elegant spirals. Her attire was simple yet impeccable, a crisp white blouse tucked into well-fitted jeans, and a pair of worn-in sneakers that spoke of practicality over pretense. Despite her high-profile career, she maintained a modest lifestyle, choosing to reside in a modest house on the outskirts of town, rather than the sprawling mansions that many of her wealthy peers favored. As she sipped her black coffee, Elena scanned the diner, her sharp eyes taking in every detail. The walls were adorned with vintage photographs of Crestwood's history, and the checkered floors bore the marks of countless footsteps. The chatter around her was a comforting background hum, punctuated by the occasional clink of cutlery and the hiss of the coffee machine. Today, however, there was an undercurrent of tension that Elena couldn't quite place. The usual ease of conversations seemed strained, and glances exchanged between patrons carried a weight she couldn't decipher. It was as if the town was holding its breath, waiting for something to unfold. Elena had returned to Crestwood for a brief visit, a respite from the relentless pace of her professional life. Despite her success, she cherished the simplicity and familiarity of her hometown, finding solace in its steady rhythm. Her visits were rare but meaningful, a way to reconnect with roots she hadn't fully explored in years. She was lost in thought when the diner's door swung open and a gust of chilly autumn air swept in. A man entered, his presence commanding attention despite his attempt to blend in tall and broad-shouldered. He wore a tailored suit that hinted at wealth, but his demeanor was anything but ostentatious. His name was Marcus Lee, a venture capitalist whose investments had transformed tech startups into industry giants. Yet, much like Elena, he preferred a low-profile existence, avoiding the limelight that his career could easily thrust him into. Marcus had come to Crestwood on business, but tonight he seemed more out of place than usual. He approached the counter, nodding curtly to Joe, the diner's owner, before ordering a black coffee, the same as Elena's. He chose a seat near the window, his eyes scanning the room with a mix of curiosity and weariness. Elena observed him for a moment, recognizing a kindred spirit in his quiet strength and understated elegance. Their paths had crossed professionally once, during a conference on healthcare innovation, but they had never interacted beyond polite introductions. There was something familiar about his presence, a shared understanding of balancing immense success with personal humility. As Marcus settled into his seat, the tension in the diner seemed to intensify. Conversations hushed, and the staff moved with a nervous energy. Joe wiped down the counter, his movements jerky and distracted, as if trying to shake off an invisible weight pressing down on him. Elena decided to approach, her curiosity piqued by the palpable unease. She rose gracefully from her booth, the sound of her footsteps barely audible over the sudden hush. Moving towards Marcus, she noticed the subtle signs of stress etched on his face: tightened jaw, furrowed brow, and eyes darting around the room with a restless vigilance. "Good evening, Marcus," Elena greeted, her voice warm and inviting. "It's been a while since you've been in Crestwood." Marcus looked up, a flicker of recognition crossing his features, before he offered a polite smile. "Elena, yes, it has. I'm just passing through for a meeting with some local business leaders." She nodded, taking a seat across from him. "Crestwood hasn't changed much, has it? Still the same close-knit community?" "Mostly," he replied, his tone guarded. "Though, as you might have noticed, there's been some unrest lately." Elena raised an eyebrow, sensing the weight behind his words. "Unrest? What do you mean?" Before Marcus could respond, the diner's door burst open again, this time admitting a group of 3 young men, their expressions a mix of frustration and defiance. They were locals, known for their outspoken nature and involvement in community activism. Their presence immediately shifted the atmosphere, drawing the attention of every patron. One of them, a tall man with dreadlocks and a confident stance, approached the counter with purpose. "Joe, we need to talk," he demanded, his voice steady but edged with irritation. Joe glanced nervously between the group and Elena and Marcus, his hands fumbling with a stack of menus. "What's the issue, guys?" The leader took a deep breath, his eyes meeting Joe's before shifting to the newcomers at the table. "It's about the new developments downtown. We've been hearing rumors about land acquisitions that don't seem right." Elena felt a familiar pang of concern. Crestwood was no stranger to tensions between longtime residents and new investments, especially those that threatened the town's character and community spaces. Marcus leaned forward, his interest piqued despite the awkward setting. "Rumors," he echoed. "What kind of developments are we talking about?" The young man hesitated, then nodded towards Elena and Marcus. "We believe there might be some influence from higher-ups trying to push these developments through without proper community input. It's like they're trying to buy their way out of accountability." Elena exchanged a glance with Marcus, recognizing the signs of systemic issues: power dynamics, influence peddling, and the marginalization of local voices. "Have you reported this to the authorities?" she asked gently. One of the other men, shorter with a buzz cut and intense eyes, shook his head. "We tried, but it feels like no one is listening. It's like they're too connected to stop it." Marcus frowned, his protective instincts kicking in. "That's serious. Do you have any evidence or leads?" The leader sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Not yet. We're trying to gather more information, but it's like hitting a wall. We need someone with influence, someone who can help us navigate this without putting themselves in danger." Elena felt a surge of determination. "Maybe I can help. What exactly are you looking for?" The leader met her gaze, a spark of hope in his eyes. "We need allies who can speak up, who have the ear of the decision-makers, people who understand the stakes and can advocate for the community's interests." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "I might know a few people who can assist. Let me see what I can do." As the conversation continued, the tension in the diner seemed to ebb and flow, but the underlying issues remained palpable. Elena and Marcus found themselves drawn into the brewing conflict, their presence inadvertently placing them at the center of a struggle that threatened to disrupt the delicate balance of Crestwood. Elena glanced around the diner, noting the silent apprehension of the other patrons. This small establishment, a symbol of Crestwood's enduring spirit, was now a battleground for competing interests. She couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of a much larger confrontation. As the young men departed, Elena and Marcus sat in contemplative silence. The initial spark of unrest had been ignited, and the implications were vast. Systemic challenges and prejudices were not confined to the shadows. They were creeping into the very heart of Crestwood, threatening to unravel the fabric of the community. "We need to tread carefully," Marcus advised, his tone serious. "These kinds of conflicts can escalate quickly if not handled with care." Elena nodded, her mind already racing with possibilities. "Agreed. But we can't ignore this. The community deserves to have a voice, and it's our responsibility to ensure they have one." The night deepened outside, the once bustling streets now cloaked in darkness. Crestwood, with all its charm and complexities, stood on the precipice of change. And at the center of it all were Elena and Marcus, two powerful figures whose actions could either bridge the divides or widen them further. As they left Joe's diner, the cool night air enveloped them, carrying with it the echoes of the day's tensions and the promise of challenges yet to come. Elena felt a renewed sense of purpose, her humility and strength poised to confront the shadows that threatened to overshadow Crestwood's legacy. Stay tuned to see how Elena and Marcus navigate the complexities of power, influence, and community in Crestwood. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories like this. The next morning, Crestwood was blanketed in a thick fog, the kind that muffled sounds and blurred the outlines of familiar streets. Dr. Elena Morgan awoke with a sense of determination, her mind still buzzing from the conversation at Joe's diner the night before. The issue at hand was more significant than she had initially anticipated, and she knew that addressing it would require persistence and resilience. After a quick breakfast, Elena met with Marcus Lee at their usual table in Joe's diner. The morning was quieter, the previous night's tension seemingly dissipated, but the weight of their task remained. "We need to start by understanding who's behind these developments," Elena said, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup. "There's something off about the way things are moving forward without proper transparency." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "Agreed. I have some contacts in the local government who might shed some light on this. Let me reach out to them." As Marcus made the call, Elena's thoughts drifted to her late husband, Daniel. He had been a community organizer, always fighting for transparency and fairness. Losing him had left a void, but his legacy of standing up for what was right now fueled her resolve. Marcus returned to the table, his expression serious. "I've set up a meeting with Councilwoman Harris for later today. She's one of the few people who might have inside information about the developments." Elena felt a surge of hope. Councilwoman Harris was known for her integrity, a rare trait in local politics. If anyone could help them, it was her. Later that afternoon, Elena and Marcus arrived at the Crestwood Town Hall, a stately building with marble columns and large imposing doors. The lobby was bustling with activity, people moving about with purpose, and the air was thick with the scent of polished wood and fresh flowers. Elena felt a pang of anxiety. This was a place where power dynamics were palpable, and she knew she would need to navigate them carefully. They approached the front desk, where a receptionist looked up with a polite but guarded smile. "How can I help you today?" "We have a meeting scheduled with Councilwoman Harris," Marcus replied smoothly, his voice steady. The receptionist glanced at her schedule, her eyes flickering momentarily over Elena before returning to the computer screen. "Let me check." She typed swiftly, her fingers tapping against the keys with practiced efficiency. After a moment, she looked up. "I'm sorry, but there's been a change. Councilwoman Harris is running late. Is there anything else I can assist you with?" Elena felt a twinge of frustration, but kept her composure. "We were hoping to discuss the recent developments in Elmwood Park. It's urgent." The receptionist's expression softened slightly, but her professionalism remained intact. "I understand. I can leave a message for her, but I can't guarantee she'll be able to address it immediately." Marcus placed a reassuring hand on Elena's shoulder. "That's all right, please do, and let us know if she can get back to us." As they turned to leave, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. The receptionist's hesitant response hinted at underlying tensions, but she pushed the thought aside, focusing instead on their next steps. Determined not to let the setback deter her, Elena decided to visit the Crestwood Public Library. If there was any information to be found about the developments, it would likely be archived there. The library was a grand building with tall windows and shelves that reached the ceiling, a haven of knowledge and history. Inside, the librarian greeted her with a warm smile. "Good afternoon, Dr. Morgan. How can I assist you today?" Elena smiled back, feeling a sense of ease in the familiar setting. "I'm researching the recent activities around Elmwood Park. Do you have any records or reports on land acquisitions or development proposals?" The librarian's expression shifted subtly, a flicker of unease passing through her eyes. "Elmwood Park. That area hasn't seen much activity in years. Are you sure you're looking in the right place?" "Yes, I believe so, Elena replied calmly. There have been rumors about unauthorized developments, and I need to verify any information. The librarian hesitated, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. I can check our records, but you might also want to speak with Councilwoman Harris directly. She handles most of the planning and zoning issues. Elena nodded, sensing that the librarian was withholding something. If there's anything you can find, please let me know. This is important. The librarian gave a small nod and began searching through the computer system. Minutes felt like hours as Elena and Marcus waited, the tension thick in the air. Finally, the librarian turned to them, her face a mixture of reluctance and resignation. There are some recent entries about land use changes and permit applications for Elmwood Park. However, most of the details are classified under confidential council meetings. Elena's frustration simmered beneath her calm exterior. Why are these details classified? Shouldn't the public have access to information about developments in their community? The librarian sighed, closing her laptop. There are protocols for that. I'm sorry, Dr. Morgan, I can't provide more than what's publicly available. Elena forced a smile, understanding the bureaucratic barriers, but still feeling obstructed. Thank you for your help. If you come across anything else, please let me know. As they left the library, Elena felt the weight of systemic challenges pressing down on her. The barriers to transparency were frustrating, and she couldn't help but feel that prejudice and biases were playing a role in how information was being withheld. That evening, Elena returned to her modest home, the setting sun casting long shadows across her living room. She sat on her favorite armchair, the same one she had shared with Daniel during countless evenings of conversation and reflection. Her phone buzzed with a notification, another message from Marcus confirming their next meeting. As she reviewed the day's events, Elena's thoughts churned. The dismissive responses from the receptionist and the librarian hinted at deeper issues within the town's administration. Was there someone actively suppressing information? And if so, who? Elena reached for her notebook, a habit she had maintained since her medical school days. She began jotting down notes, organizing her thoughts and the fragments of information she had gathered. Each entry built upon the last, forming a clearer picture of the obstacles they faced. Systemic suppression of information, she wrote. Possible collusion with developers. Need to identify key players resisting transparency. Her pen paused as she considered her next move. Public forums were often avenues for voicing concerns, but would the community even be receptive? Given the current climate, Elena knew that addressing these issues would require not just evidence, but also rallying support from those who shared her concerns. The following day, Elena and Marcus decided to attend the next town meeting, hoping to gather more insights and possibly confront those responsible for the secrecy. The Crestwood Town Hall was already bustling with residents eager to discuss local matters. The large auditorium was filled with chairs arranged in neat rows, and a stage at the front held a podium adorned with the Crestwood seal. Elena found a seat near the back, her presence commanding attention, yet blending seamlessly with the crowd. Marcus sat beside her, scanning the room for familiar faces. The atmosphere was tense, conversations hushed, as the community prepared to address the ongoing issues. Councilwoman Harris took the stage, her demeanor composed and authoritative. Thank you all for coming today. We need to address the concerns surrounding Elmwood Park and the proposed developments. I understand there's been a lot of speculation and questions, and I'm here to provide clarity. Elena listened intently, hoping for transparency, but bracing herself for potential obstructions. As Harris began to speak, outlining the approved permits and planned renovations, Elena noticed subtle signs of resistance. Councilwoman Harris's voice was firm, but her eyes darted around the room, meeting Elena's gaze briefly, a silent acknowledgement of shared purpose. After the meeting, Elena approached the podium, her steps steady, despite the undercurrent of tension. Councilwoman Harris, thank you for your presentation. I have a few questions regarding the transparency of these developments. Harris turned to her, a polite smile masking a hint of defensiveness. Of course, Dr. Morgan, what would you like to know? Elena took a deep breath, maintaining her calm. Can you elaborate on why certain details of the development plans are classified? The community deserves full disclosure to ensure that these projects benefit everyone and do not favor specific interests over the common good. Harris's smile faltered slightly. Dr. Morgan, Some aspects of the development are still in the planning stages and require confidentiality to protect proprietary information. However, I assure you that all necessary permits have been obtained and the projects adhere to town regulations." Elena nodded thoughtfully. "I appreciate your assurance, but without detailed information, it's challenging to assess the true impact of these developments. Transparency is crucial for maintaining trust within the community." Before Harris could respond, a hand shot up from the audience. It was Officer Daniels, a local police officer known for his loyalty to the council and his no-nonsense attitude. "Councilwoman Harris, how can you expect the community to trust these developments when there's been such a lack of transparency? It feels like decisions are being made behind closed doors without considering the residents' voices." Harris responded with a measured tone. "Officer Daniels, we are committed to the growth and improvement of Crestwood. These developments are aimed at revitalizing Elmwood Park and providing new opportunities for our residents. We are following all legal procedures and ensuring that the projects align with the town's long-term vision." Elena could feel the room's energy shift, the conversation teetering between constructive dialogue and underlying tension. She decided to seize the moment. "If there are concerns about the development's impact, perhaps we can establish a community oversight committee. This would ensure that all voices are heard and that the projects are implemented fairly and transparently." Harris considered her suggestion, her gaze lingering on Elena. "That's a reasonable proposal, Dr. Morgan. I will take it into consideration and discuss it with the council." As Elena returned to her seat, she felt a mixture of relief and frustration. The councilwoman's initial openness was a positive sign, but the presence of Officer Daniels and the subtle dismissals hinted at deeper issues. The fight for transparency was far from over, and Elena knew that confronting the systemic biases within Crestwood's administration would require unwavering determination. Days turned into weeks as Elena and Marcus delved deeper into the mystery surrounding Elmwood Park. They attended multiple town meetings, each time facing a mix of support and resistance from the community. While some residents echoed their concerns, others remained skeptical, influenced by the prevailing power structures and ingrained prejudices. One afternoon, Elena received an unexpected call from Officer Daniels. His voice was curt, lacking the usual cordiality she had come to expect. "Dr. Morgan, I need you to come down to the station. It's about Elmwood Park." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. Why was the police officer requesting a meeting? Her mind raced with possibilities: harassment, intimidation, or perhaps something more sinister. She met Marcus at Joe's diner, their expressions mirroring the unease she felt. "What did Daniel say?" Marcus asked, his eyes narrowing with concern. "Something about Elmwood Park," Elena replied, her voice steady despite the apprehension. "I need to go. I might have to face him alone." Marcus reached across the table, offering a reassuring squeeze to her hand. "I'll be right behind you. We need to support each other." Together, they made their way to the Crestwood Police Department, the building's imposing facade now feeling more like a fortress than a place of public service. The parking lot was quiet. The only sounds the distant hum of traffic and the rustle of leaves in the autumn breeze. Inside, the station was less welcoming than Elena had remembered. The air was heavy with the scent of antiseptic and the tension of unspoken conflicts. Officer Daniels awaited them in a small interrogation room, his posture rigid and his expression unreadable. "Please have a seat," Daniels said, gesturing to the chairs opposite him. Elena and Marcus sat down, the room's stark simplicity heightening the sense of formality and authority. Daniels leaned forward, his eyes locking onto Elena's with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. "Dr. Morgan, I've been reviewing your recent activities concerning Elmwood Park," he began, his tone clipped. "It appears you and your associate are actively working to uncover information about these developments." Elena maintained her composure, meeting his gaze with unwavering professionalism. "Yes, that's correct. We believe there are inconsistencies and a lack of transparency that need to be addressed for the sake of the community." Daniel's expression hardened slightly. "We appreciate your concern, but interfering with official projects can lead to unnecessary complications. Elmwood Park's redevelopment is a priority for the town, and any disruptions could hinder progress." Elena felt a pang of frustration, but kept her voice calm. Progress should never come at the expense of transparency and fairness. The community has a right to know what's happening and to have a say in these developments. Daniels sighed, leaning back in his chair. I understand your position, but you need to be careful. There are powerful interests involved, and not everyone is happy with the scrutiny your actions bring. Marcus interjected, his voice firm. We're not looking to disrupt progress for personal gain. Our goal is to ensure that the community is protected and that developments are carried out ethically and transparently. Daniel's gaze flickered to Marcus, a hint of condescension in his eyes. Ethics and transparency are important, but so is progress. Sometimes, decisions have to be made quickly to keep up with changing times. Elena felt the weight of his dismissive attitude, a subtle undercurrent of bias that she couldn't ignore. Progress shouldn't blind us to ethical considerations. Ignoring community input can lead to greater issues down the line. Daniels nodded slowly, as if considering her words. I'll take your concerns back to the council, but I advise you to proceed with caution. Not everyone in Crestwood is as open-minded as you and your associate. As they left the station, Elena couldn't help but feel the sting of Daniels's implicit bias. The conversation had been a mix of veiled threats and dismissive tones, hinting at the lengths the authorities might go to suppress dissent. She exchanged a worried glance with Marcus, both recognizing the systemic challenges they now faced. The following week brought no respite. Crestwood's social climate seemed to grow tenser, the lines between support and opposition blurring as the community grappled with the implications of the developments. Elena and Marcus continued their efforts, attending meetings, interviewing residents, and piecing together the puzzle of Elmwood Park's redevelopment. One evening, as Elena was reviewing documents in her home office, her phone buzzed with a message from Marcus. Meeting with Councilwoman Harris rescheduled to tomorrow. She mentioned some delays, but didn't elaborate. Be prepared. Elena sighed, leaning back in her chair. The path to transparency was riddled with obstacles, each encounter revealing more about the entrenched biases and hidden agendas within Crestwood's administration. She reminded herself to stay focused, to channel her frustration into productive action rather than allowing it to undermine her composure. The next day, Elena and Marcus arrived at the town hall once more, their determination unwavering despite the mounting challenges. The auditorium was packed, the air thick with anticipation and apprehension. Councilwoman Harris greeted them warmly, her demeanor a stark contrast to Officer Daniels' icy professionalism. Dr. Morgan, Mr. Lee, thank you for joining us again, Harris said, her smile genuine. We've reviewed your concerns, and I believe it's time to address them more thoroughly. Elena felt a surge of optimism. Thank you, Councilwoman Harris. We appreciate your willingness to engage with the community on this issue. Harris gestured to the podium. Let's begin with a detailed overview of the Elmwood Park project, addressing any questions or concerns you may have. As the meeting progressed, Elena noticed subtle signs of resistance among certain council members. Their body language, crossed arms, tight smiles, and avoiding direct eye contact signaled underlying tensions. When questions about transparency and community involvement arose, some members deflected, while others attempted to downplay the importance of public input. Midway through the session, a man stood up from the audience, his expression stern and unyielding. He was Reginald Thompson, the town's long-serving mayor, known for his conservative stance on development and his close ties to influential business figures. Councilwoman Harris, while I understand the need for transparency, we must also consider the economic benefits these developments bring to Crestwood. Delaying projects for excessive scrutiny could hinder our town's growth. Elena felt a knot tighten in her stomach. Reginald's words were a thinly veiled attempt to dismiss legitimate concerns. She remained calm, her voice steady as she responded. Mayor Thompson, economic growth is important, but it shouldn't come at the expense of community trust and ethical standards. Balancing both is crucial for sustainable development. Thompson shot her a cold glance, his jaw tightening. Dr. Morgan, your perspective is valuable, but we must prioritize progress. The community will ultimately benefit from these improvements. The tension in the room was palpable, the clash of priorities highlighting the systemic biases that Elena had been fighting against. As the meeting drew to a close, Harris addressed the crowd. We hear your concerns and are committed to finding a balanced approach. We will form a task force to ensure that community input is integrated into the development process. Elena exchanged a hopeful glance with Marcus, but the encounter with Mayor Thompson had reinforced the challenges they faced. The subtle prejudices and overt dismissals were barriers that required more than just polite conversations to overcome. Days turned into another week, and the pressure continued to mount. Elena received anonymous messages hinting at surveillance and threats. Attempts to intimidate her into backing down microaggressions became more frequent. Subtle comments questioning her authority, assumptions about her intentions, and dismissive gestures that undermined her efforts. One afternoon, Elena was invited to speak at a local community center, addressing residents about the importance of transparency and ethical development. As she prepared her presentation, she couldn't help but feel the weight of the impending confrontation. The community center was a vital space, a symbol of unity and support, but it was now a battleground for conflicting interests. As she stood before the gathered crowd, Elena took a deep breath, her presence commanding, yet approachable. "Thank you all for being here today. We need to talk about how we can ensure that our developments benefit everyone, not just a select few." Her words were met with a mix of nods and skeptical glances. The room divided between supporters and those swayed by the council's narrative. Elena navigated the room with grace, addressing concerns and advocating for inclusive dialogue. Yet, the undercurrents of prejudice and resistance were hard to ignore, each interaction revealing the deep-seated biases that threatened to derail their efforts. After the session, as Elena was packing up her notes, an older woman approached her, her demeanor cautious yet respectful. "Dr. Morgan, I've been listening to your talks. I support what you're doing, but I worry about the pushback you're facing. It's not easy standing up against the tide." Elena offered a warm smile, grateful for the support. "Thank you, Mrs. Jenkins. It means a lot to hear that change is never easy, but it's necessary for progress." The woman nodded, her eyes reflecting a mixture of hope and concern. "Just be careful. There are people who don't want things to change." Elena placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "I will. But we can't let fear stop us from doing what's right." As she left the community center, Elena's resolve only strengthened. The prejudice and biases she encountered were obstacles, but they also underscored the importance of her mission. She knew that overcoming these challenges would require not just persistence, but also unity and strategic action. Later that week, Elena decided to take a more proactive approach, organizing a town hall meeting specifically focused on addressing the concerns surrounding Elmwood Park. She collaborated with Marcus and a few supportive community members to plan the event, ensuring that it would be a platform for open dialogue and transparent discussion. The night of the town hall arrived, and the community center was filled to capacity. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation, the air thick with a mix of hope and apprehension. Elena stood at the podium, her heart pounding with a mix of nerves and determination. "Welcome, everyone," she began, her voice steady and confident. "Tonight, we're here to discuss the future of Elmwood Park and how we can ensure that its redevelopment benefits our entire community. Your voices are important, and together, we can create a plan that reflects our collective needs and aspirations." As the meeting progressed, Elena facilitated a series of discussions, encouraging residents to share their thoughts and concerns. The room buzzed with conversation, a testament to the community's investment in the issue. However, underlying tensions remained. The biases and prejudices that had plagued their efforts still present in subtle and overt forms. Towards the end of the evening, a heated exchange erupted between Elena and Reginald Thompson. Thompson stood up, his expression stern and unyielding. "Dr. Morgan, while I appreciate your efforts to involve the community, we must prioritize economic development. Crestwood cannot afford to stagnate. These projects will create jobs, improve infrastructure, and enhance our town's reputation." Elena met his gaze, her calm demeanor unwavering. "Mayor Thompson, economic development is important, but it shouldn't come at the expense of community trust and ethical standards. We need to find a balance that ensures everyone benefits, not just a select few." Thompson's eyes narrowed slightly, a hint of frustration in his tone. "And what exactly do you propose? Endless meetings and committees that delay progress. We have deadlines and budgets to meet." Elena took a deep breath, maintaining her composure despite the rising tension. "I propose transparency, accountability, and genuine community involvement. We need to ensure that these developments are fair, equitable, and sustainable. Without that, we risk alienating the very people we aim to benefit." The room fell silent, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Thompson's response was measured, but his underlying bias was evident. "We'll see about that. The council will decide the best course of action for Crestwood's future." As the meeting adjourned, Elena felt a mix of emotions. The progress made was significant, but the barriers they faced were formidable. She exchanged a determined glance with Marcus, both recognizing the uphill battle that lay ahead. In the weeks that followed, the conflict surrounding Elmwood Park intensified. Elena and Marcus found themselves at the center of a growing movement. Their efforts to promote transparency and community involvement met with both support and resistance. The systemic biases and prejudices they encountered were becoming more pronounced, each encounter testing their resolve and patience. One afternoon, as Elena was reviewing documents in her home office, her phone buzzed with an urgent message from Marcus. Meeting with Councilwoman Harris got heated. She mentioned a potential setback for the Transparency Initiative. "Can you come over?" Without hesitation, Elena grabbed her coat and made her way to Marcus's office, a sleek space adorned with modern furnishings and impressive views of Crestwood. As she entered, she found Marcus pacing the room, his face etched with frustration. "Did she say anything specific?" Elena asked, settling into a chair across from him. Marcus sighed, running a hand through his hair. "She mentioned that there might be pushback from certain council members who have vested interests in the development. It sounds like they're planning to roll back some of our efforts to ensure transparency." Elena felt a surge of determination. "We can't let that happen. We need to rally support and show the council that the community stands behind us." Marcus nodded. "I agree, but we need to be strategic. The council is divided, and those in power won't hesitate to use their influence to maintain control." Elena leaned forward, her eyes shining with resolve. "Then we expose the truth. We gather more evidence, bring in more voices, and make it clear that the community demands accountability." As they strategized, Elena couldn't help but reflect on the subtle and overt prejudices she had encountered, from the dismissive attitudes of law enforcement to the condescending remarks of influential figures like Mayor Thompson. It was clear that systemic biases were at play, hindering their efforts to protect the community's interests. Yet despite the growing injustice, Elena remained calm and professional, channeling her frustration into constructive action. Internally, she grappled with anger and a deep sense of helplessness, but she knew that losing her composure would only weaken their cause. The turning point came unexpectedly. One evening, as Elena was leaving the youth center where she volunteered, she noticed a commotion outside a local boutique. A crowd had gathered, and the police presence was unmistakable. Her heart raced as she approached, recognizing Officer Daniels leading a group of officers into the store. Inside, she saw the boutique's owner, a well-respected member of the community, being questioned. The reason was unclear, but the aggressive tone of the officers suggested something more than routine inquiry. Elena's instinct told her something was wrong. She stepped forward, her presence commanding attention. "Officer Daniels, what's going on here?" Daniels turned to her, a hint of irritation in his eyes. "Dr. Morgan, we have reason to believe that this establishment is involved in unauthorized dealings related to the Elmwood Park developments." Elena felt a pang of recognition. "I assure you, there's no connection between this boutique and our efforts to ensure transparency. What evidence do you have?" Daniels's jaw tightened, his voice clipped. "We've received credible reports of illicit transactions tied to this location. We need to investigate further." Elena maintained her composure, though internally she seethed. "These accusations are unfounded and seem to be an attempt to discredit our efforts. Is there any concrete evidence tying this establishment to the developments?" The officers exchanged glances, the tension in the room palpable. One of them, a younger officer, shifted uncomfortably. "We're following leads. If you have information, now is the time to share." Elena met his gaze, her voice steady. "We have nothing to hide. Our goal is to protect the community from unethical developments, not to engage in any illicit activities." Daniels stepped closer, his expression cold. "We'll see about that. If you have any information, you know where to find us." As the officers left, Elena turned to the boutique owner, who looked shaken but composed. "Are you all right?" The owner nodded slowly. I'm fine, but I have no idea why they're targeting me. I've always been supportive of community projects, including Elmwood Park. Elena placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. Stay strong. If you need support, don't hesitate to reach out. As she walked away, Elena felt a mix of frustration and determination. The blatant bias and misuse of authority were clear indicators that the fight for transparency was not just against unknown developers, but against a system that favored those in power over the community's well-being. She shared the incident with Marcus, their resolve only strengthening. "This is exactly what we feared," Marcus said, his voice heavy with concern. "The authorities are using their power to undermine our efforts and silence opposition." Elena nodded, her mind already racing with strategies to counteract these tactics. "We need to document everything, gather evidence of these abuses, and rally the community to stand against this corruption." As they worked together, the bond between Elena and Marcus deepened, their shared purpose forging a partnership built on trust and mutual respect. They knew that the road ahead would be fraught with challenges, but their commitment to protecting Crestwood's integrity fueled their perseverance. One crisp evening, Elena attended a private meeting with Councilwoman Harris and a few key community leaders. The room was dimly lit, the air thick with the scent of polished wood and the tension of unspoken conflicts. "Dr. Morgan, Mr. Lee, thank you for coming," Harris began, her tone conciliatory. "We need to address the growing concerns and the pushback you've been experiencing. It's clear that there are deeper issues at play." Elena met her gaze, her voice calm but firm. "We're here to ensure that the developments around Elmwood Park are carried out transparently and ethically. We believe that with the right oversight, we can achieve a balanced outcome that benefits the entire community." Harris nodded thoughtfully. "I agree. However, there are those within the council who are resistant to change and have vested interest in the current plans. It's creating a rift that's difficult to navigate." Marcus interjected, his voice steady. "If there are internal conflicts, perhaps we can mediate a dialogue to address these concerns and find common ground. The community's trust is at stake, and we need to prioritize that over personal agendas." Harris sighed, her shoulders slumping slightly. "I wish it were that simple. The power dynamics are complicated, and some members are not willing to compromise." Elena leaned forward, her determination palpable. "Then we need to bring these issues to light. Transparency isn't just about the projects themselves, but about how decisions are made and who's influencing them. We need to hold those in power accountable." Harris looked at her with a mixture of admiration and concern. "You're right. We need to find a way to address this without causing further division. Perhaps forming an independent oversight committee, as you suggested earlier, could help bridge the gap." Elena nodded. "That would be a step in the right direction. An impartial body could ensure that all voices are heard and that the developments proceed fairly." The meeting continued, the conversation ebbing and flowing between hope and frustration. Elena felt the stakes rising, the battle for Crestwood's future intensifying with each passing day. The systemic prejudices and biases were not just abstract concepts. They were tangible obstacles that required unwavering resolve to overcome. As she left the meeting, Elena felt a renewed sense of purpose. The conflict had escalated, revealing the depths of resistance they faced, but it also highlighted the importance of their mission. She glanced at Marcus, who offered a supportive smile. Together, they were ready to confront the challenges head-on, determined to protect their community from the shadows of influence that threatened to undermine its integrity. Stay tuned to witness the pivotal moments that will shape Crestwood's future and test Elena and Marcus's resilience. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to follow their journey. The weeks following the tense town meetings were a whirlwind of activity for Dr. Elena Morgan and Marcus Lee. Their efforts to uncover the truth behind Elmwood Park's redevelopment had drawn both support and resistance from the Crestwood community. The systemic prejudices and hidden agendas they faced were becoming increasingly evident, adding layers of complexity to their mission. One crisp Monday morning, Elena received an urgent email from Marcus. The subject line read, "Urgent, meeting with Councilwoman Harris rescheduled to tonight." Her heart raced as she skimmed the contents. "Change in schedule. Please arrive by 6 p.m. at the Crestwood Town Hall. It's about the Elmwood Park situation, important developments." Elena glanced at the clock, It was already 2 p.m. She had a full day ahead, but the urgency in Marcus's message left little room for hesitation. She quickly finished her morning routine, grabbing her notebook and a pen, before heading to the library to gather any additional information she could find on recent council activities. At the Crestwood Public Library, Elena dove into the archives, sifting through old meeting minutes and public records. She had a hunch that the key to unraveling the mystery lay within the town's historical documents. Hours passed as she meticulously pieced together the timeline of Elmwood Park's decline and the sudden interest in its redevelopment. As the sun began to dip towards the horizon, Elena closed the heavy leather-bound volumes, her mind buzzing with connections and suspicions. She noticed a recurring name, Reginald Thompson, a prominent figure in Crestwood, known for his influence in local politics and business. Thompson had consistently opposed transparency initiatives, often citing economic growth as his primary concern. Just as she was about to leave, her phone buzzed with a new message from Marcus. "I just received a tip. Someone might be trying to sabotage our efforts. Be cautious tonight." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. Sabotage. The stakes were higher than she had imagined. She quickly made her way back home, her thoughts racing with the implications of Marcus's warning. That evening, Crestwood Town Hall was enveloped in a tense atmosphere. The usual clamor of townsfolk had given way to a subdued anticipation. Elena arrived early, her presence commanding yet approachable. Marcus joined her shortly after, his expression grave. As the clock struck 6, Councilwoman Harris took the stage, her demeanor calm but authoritative. "Thank you all for coming. We have pressing matters to discuss regarding Elmwood Park's redevelopment. Recent developments have raised significant concerns, and it's imperative that we address them transparently." Elena felt a surge of hope. Perhaps this was the opportunity they needed to push their agenda forward. However, the meeting quickly took a darker turn. Midway through the discussion, a loud commotion erupted at the back of the auditorium. Chairs scraped against the floor as a group of masked individuals stormed the room, their intentions clear. Among them was Officer Daniels, his uniform partially concealed beneath a dark jacket. The room erupted into chaos as alarms blared and people ducked for cover. "Everyone, stay calm!" Elena shouted, trying to regain control of the situation. She scanned the room, her eyes locking onto the masked intruders who moved with alarming precision. Marcus sprang into action, pulling Elena towards the exits while trying to shield her from the unfolding violence. However, one of the intruders, a tall man with a commanding presence, approached them menacingly. "Dr. Morgan, Marcus Lee, your interference has gone too far," the man growled, his voice distorted by the mask. "You're stepping into matters that don't concern you." Elena felt her blood boil, a mixture of fear and righteous anger coursing through her veins. "We're here to protect our community from corruption and ensure transparency," she retorted, her voice unwavering despite the danger. The masked man sneered, revealing a glimpse of Officer Daniels' face beneath the mask. "You think you can change the system? You're just pawns in a bigger game." Before Elena could respond, the intruders brandished weapons, forcing the room into a state of terror. Panic ensued as people screamed and scrambled for safety. Elena and Marcus found themselves cornered near the stage, their options limited. Suddenly, the lights flickered and went out, plunging the auditorium into darkness. The room was silent, except for the heavy breathing and the distant sounds of chaos outside. Elena's mind raced, assessing their precarious situation. "Stay close," Marcus whispered, his eyes scanning the darkness for any signs of their assailants. A moment of tense silence passed before a flicker of light emanated from a doorway. A spotlight illuminated a figure standing at the entrance, Reginald Thompson. His face was stern, and his eyes bore into Elena and Marcus with an intensity that sent shivers down their spines. "Enough," Thompson declared, his voice cutting through the silence. "This ends now." The masked intruders hesitated, uncertainty evident in their movements. Thompson took a step forward, his presence commanding immediate respect and fear. "You're not going to intimidate the community," he continued, his gaze never leaving Elena's. "We demand that you cease your interference with Elmwood Park's redevelopment. This project will proceed as planned." Elena felt a surge of defiance. "Not when it's built on lies and hidden agendas. The community deserves the truth, and we won't back down until we get it." Thompson's expression hardened. "Your persistence only brings more trouble. We have ways of handling dissenters." Before either could react, the lights flickered back on, and the masked intruders advanced, weapons drawn. Elena and Marcus braced themselves, ready to defend their cause, but the situation was spiraling out of control. In a split second, a group of loyal community members, alerted by the commotion, burst into the room. Among them were several members of the youth center, including a young woman named Jasmine Turner, whose fiery spirit and unwavering support had been instrumental in rallying the community's opposition to the redevelopment. "Stop this now!" Jasmine shouted, stepping between Elena and the intruders. "We're not going to let you terrorize our town!" A tense standoff ensued, the room teetering on the brink of violence. Thompson and his group hesitated, faced with the united front of Elena, Marcus, Jasmine, and the rest of the community. The power dynamics had shifted, the oppressed standing up against the oppressors. Elena took a deep breath, feeling the collective strength of the community behind her. "This isn't the way we can resolve this without violence. Let's sit down and talk." Thompson glanced around, seeing the determination in everyone's eyes. For a moment, the room held its breath, the future of Crestwood hanging in the balance. Finally, Thompson nodded reluctantly. "Fine. We'll talk, but know that this project is non-negotiable." As the tension began to ease, Elena and Marcus exchanged a glance, both recognizing the precariousness of the situation. The confrontation had reached a critical point, the path forward fraught with challenges and uncertainties. Outside the auditorium, the chaos had subsided, but the underlying tensions remained. News of the incident spread quickly, igniting conversations and debates throughout Crestwood. The community was polarized, with some rallying behind Elena and Marcus, while others remained loyal to Thompson's vision of progress. In the days that followed, Elena and Marcus found themselves thrust into the spotlight. Media outlets clamored for interviews, and social media buzzed with opinions and speculations. The systemic prejudices they had been battling were now front and center, with questions about race, power, and influence permeating the discourse. One evening, as Elena sat in her modest home, she received a call from Jasmine. Her voice was urgent. "Elena, we need to meet. It's about Thompson and the developments. There's more going on than we thought." Elena felt a knot tighten in her stomach. "What do you mean? What's happened?" Jasmine's tone was filled with a mix of fear and determination. "I can't explain over the phone. Meet me at the youth center tonight at 8 p.m. It's important." Without hesitation, Elena agreed, knowing that Jasmine was a reliable ally who wouldn't drag her into something without good reason. As the evening approached, Elena and Marcus made their way to the youth center, the weight of their mission pressing down on them. When they arrived, the center was eerily quiet, the usual sounds of activity replaced by a tense silence. Jasmine stood at the entrance, her face pale but resolute. She ushered them inside, leading them to a secluded corner of the building. "Thank you for coming," Jasmine began, her voice barely above a whisper. "We've been investigating some of Thompson's connections, and we found something alarming." Elena leaned in, her curiosity piqued. "What did you find?" Jasmine pulled out a folder, her hands trembling slightly. "Documents and emails that show Thompson has been collaborating with some high-profile developers to push through the Elmwood Park project without proper oversight. He's been using his influence to bypass regulations and silence opposition." Marcus took the folder, scanning through the contents. The evidence was damning, revealing a web of corruption and deceit that went deeper than they had initially suspected. "Elena, this is it," Jasmine said, her eyes meeting Elena's with a mixture of hope and fear. "With this, we can expose the truth and halt the development before it's too late." Elena felt a surge of determination. "We need to bring this to the council and the media. This information is crucial for holding Thompson and his associates accountable." As they prepared to take action, the sound of sirens pierced the night air, growing louder by the second panic set in, as they realized that the authorities had been alerted to their meeting. "Hide the evidence," Marcus instructed, his voice calm despite the chaos unfolding around them. "We need to protect ourselves and ensure that this information gets out." Elena nodded, quickly stashing the folder in her bag. They retreated to a hidden corner of the youth center, the sound of footsteps and muffled voices approaching. The tension was unbearable, the stakes higher than ever before. Just as the doors burst open, Officer Daniels stepped into the room, flanked by a group of uniformed officers. His eyes locked onto Elena, Marcus and Jasmine, with a mix of suspicion and anger. "End of the line!" Daniels barked, his hand resting on his holster. "You're all coming with us." Elena remained composed, her voice steady as she addressed Daniels. "Officer Daniels, we have evidence of corruption and unauthorized developments. We're not going to let you silence us." Daniels sneered, his contempt evident. "You think you can expose Thompson and his cronies? You're just a doctor and a capitalist playing heroes. This town needs progress, not your misguided interference." Before anyone could react, the officers moved in, surrounding Elena, Marcus, and Jasmine. The room descended into chaos as the trio resisted, fighting to protect the evidence and their mission. In the midst of the struggle, Jasmine managed to slip out the back door, disappearing into the night with the crucial documents. Elena and Marcus were restrained, their efforts to maintain composure thwarted by the forceful actions of the officers. As they were led out of the youth center, Elena felt a mixture of fear and determination. The pivotal moment had arrived, the culmination of their efforts, and the beginning of an even more intense battle against systemic corruption and prejudice. "Don't give up," Marcus whispered, as they were handcuffed and escorted to the police car. "This is just the beginning. We have the evidence, and the community will stand with us." Elena nodded, her resolve unwavering despite the overwhelming odds. "We'll see this through, no matter what." As the police car sped away into the night, the fate of Crestwood hung in the balance. The community was now fully aware of the depths of corruption that threatened to unravel their town, and Elena and Marcus had become the symbols of resistance against the entrenched power structures. The final showdown was imminent, the anticipation and tension reaching their peak as the protagonists prepared to confront the systemic injustices head-on. Stay tuned to witness the climactic confrontation that will determine the future of Crestwood and test Elena and Marcus's resilience. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to follow their journey. The police car's headlights faded into the darkness as Elena Morgan and Marcus Lee were escorted out of the youth center. Their hands were cuffed, and their protests met with indifferent or hostile stares from the officers surrounding them. Elena's mind raced, processing the events that had just transpired. The folder Jasmine had secured, containing irrefutable evidence of Reginald Thompson's corrupt dealings, was now their greatest asset and their biggest liability. As the car pulled up to the police station, Elena took a deep breath, her resolve hardening. She glanced at Marcus, whose usually calm demeanor now mirrored her own tension. "We need to stay strong," she whispered, her voice steady despite the chaos inside. The station was a stark contrast to the community center's vibrant energy. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a harsh glow on the sterile gray walls. Elena and Marcus were led into a cramped interrogation room, the door clicking shut behind them with a finality that echoed in the silent space. Officer Daniels sat behind a metal table, his expression unreadable beneath the brim of his hat. "Dr. Morgan, Mr. Lee," he began, his tone formal yet edged with something unspoken. "We have some questions regarding your involvement with Elmwood Park." Elena met his gaze directly, refusing to be intimidated. "I'm here to ensure that the redevelopment is carried out ethically and transparently. I don't see how that relates to any wrongdoing." Daniels leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "We have evidence suggesting that you and your associate have been interfering with official projects. This kind of obstruction can have serious legal consequences." Marcus interjected, his voice calm but firm. "Interfering? We're merely advocating for transparency and accountability. You're accusing us of obstruction based on unfounded claims." Daniels's gaze shifted between them, a flicker of frustration crossing his features. "Your actions have raised suspicions, and we need to investigate further. You're both free to go for now, but you may be required to return for additional questioning." As they were led out of the interrogation room, Elena felt a surge of anger and determination. The unjust treatment was blatant, a clear manifestation of the systemic biases they had been fighting against. She knew that standing up against corruption would only bring more resistance, but she was unwilling to back down. Back outside, the bustling energy of Crestwood felt like a distant memory. The community center was now a symbol of their struggle, a beacon of resistance against the entrenched power structures. Elena and Marcus exchanged a look of mutual support, their bond strengthened by the adversity they faced. The days that followed were a blur of legal battles and public scrutiny. Elena and Marcus found themselves thrust into the media spotlight, their every move scrutinized by journalists eager to uncover the truth behind the Elmwood Park developments. The local newspapers ran headlines questioning their motives, insinuating that their advocacy was a front for ulterior agendas. At the heart of the storm was Officer Daniels, whose subtle microaggressions had now escalated into overt acts of discrimination. He appeared on talk shows and panel discussions, painting Elena and Marcus as troublemakers disrupting Crestwood's progress. His influence within the town's law enforcement and political circles made it difficult for the protagonists to find unbiased allies. One afternoon, Elena received a call from Joe, the owner of Joe's Diner. His usually jovial voice was tinged with worry. "Elena, you need to come down to the diner. There's something you should see." Concern etched across her face. Elena made her way to the diner, Marcus following close behind. As they entered, they found Joe standing by the counter, his hands trembling slightly as he held a stack of papers. "What's going on, Joe?" Elena asked, sensing the urgency in his demeanor. Joe handed her the documents, his eyes darting nervously around the room. "I overheard some officers talking about you two. They're planning to discredit your efforts by spreading false information. They've got forged documents showing you were involved in unauthorized meetings and financial transactions related to Elmwood Park." Elena's heart sank as she sifted through the papers, recognizing the fraudulent signatures and manipulated data. "This is a deliberate attempt to tarnish our reputation," she said, her voice laced with frustration. Marcus examined the documents closely. "We need to get these to the media and our legal team immediately. This is escalating beyond anything we anticipated." Joe nodded, his expression resolute despite the fear evident in his eyes. "I've already reached out to a trusted journalist, Clara Bennett. She's been fair in the past, and I believe she can help expose the truth." With Joe's support, Elena and Marcus felt a glimmer of hope amidst the mounting challenges. Clara Bennett was known for her integrity and dedication to uncovering the truth, making her an invaluable ally in their fight against corruption. Elena spent sleepless nights strategizing with Marcus and their legal team, determined to counter the false allegations and protect their mission. The weight of systemic prejudice bore down on her, but her internal strength remained unshaken. She drew inspiration from her late husband, Daniel, whose unwavering commitment to justice continued to guide her. One evening, as she reviewed the forged documents, Elena reflected on the path ahead. "We can't let them win," she declared, her voice resolute. "We have to prove our innocence and continue fighting for what's right." Marcus placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We'll get through this together. Clara's going to help us expose the truth." Their resolve was tested further when Reginald Thompson, the town's mayor, publicly denounced their efforts. At a high-profile fundraiser for the redevelopment project, Thompson took the microphone, his voice loud and authoritative. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his gaze sweeping the crowd, "we have been misled by certain individuals who claim to be fighting for transparency. However, their actions speak otherwise. Dr. Morgan and Mr. Lee are disrupting the progress of Crestwood with their baseless accusations." The room buzzed with murmurs as Thompson continued to paint Elena and Marcus as antagonists. Elena felt a surge of anger, but remained composed, her mind focused on the bigger picture. She knew that engaging in public confrontations would only serve to entrench the prejudices and biases they were up against. After the fundraiser, Clara Bennett met with them at Joe's Diner, the warmth of the familiar setting providing a brief respite from the relentless pressure. "I've reviewed the documents you provided," Clara said, her expression serious. "It's clear they're forged. We need to publish this immediately to counter the false narrative Thompson is pushing." Elena nodded, her determination renewed. "Thank you, Clara. Your support means everything right now." As the days turned into weeks, Clara's investigative reporting began to shift public opinion. Her articles meticulously debunked the forged documents and highlighted the systemic corruption within Crestwood's administration. The community started to see through the facade that Thompson and Officer Daniels had constructed, rallying behind Elena and Marcus in their pursuit of justice. Despite the progress, the opposition grew more aggressive. Officer Daniels intensified his efforts to discredit Elena and Marcus, using his influence to orchestrate smear campaigns and manipulate evidence. The town's trust in law enforcement wavered, as Clara's reports revealed the extent of Daniel's misconduct and his complicity in Thompson's schemes. One afternoon, as Elena and Marcus attended a community meeting to discuss the ongoing developments, the atmosphere was charged with anticipation. Residents filled the room, their faces a mix of hope and skepticism. Elena stood at the front, her presence commanding yet approachable. "We've made significant strides in uncovering the truth behind Elmwood Park's redevelopment," she began, her voice steady. "But our fight isn't over. We need to continue pushing for transparency and hold those responsible accountable." The room erupted in applause, the community's support evident. However, the celebration was short-lived as Reginald Thompson entered the meeting hall, his expression cold and calculating. He approached the podium, silencing the crowd with a mere presence. "Dr. Morgan, Mr. Lee," Thompson began, his voice dripping with condescension. "While I respect your passion, your interference is causing unnecessary delays and costing the town valuable resources. Crestwood cannot afford to be bogged down by your personal vendettas." Elena met his gaze, her resolve unwavering. "This isn't a personal vendetta, Mayor Thompson. It's about ensuring that our community's interests are prioritized over unchecked development." Thompson smirked, a subtle display of contempt. "Your definition of community interests seems skewed to me. You're disrupting progress that benefits us all." As the confrontation escalated, Officer Daniels entered the room, his presence a stark reminder of the systemic biases Elena and Marcus were battling. "Councilwoman Harris, we need to address these unfounded accusations immediately," he interjected, his tone authoritative. Harris sighed, her patience wearing thin. "Officer Daniels, we've already addressed this. Let the community decide what they want." The tension in the room reached its peak as Thompson and Daniels joined forces against Elena and Marcus. The stakes had never been higher. Crestwood's future hung in the balance, and the protagonists were now targets of a coordinated effort to silence them. Amidst the escalating conflict, Joe's Diner became a sanctuary for Elena and Marcus, a place where they could strategize and seek solace. Joe, ever the supportive figure, provided a safe space for their meetings, offering encouragement and practical assistance whenever needed. One evening, as they gathered in the back of the diner, Jasmine Turner joined them, her fiery spirit undeterred by the mounting pressures. "We need to organize a community march," she suggested, her eyes blazing with determination. "Show Thompson and Daniels that we won't be intimidated." Elena nodded thoughtfully. "A public demonstration could galvanize support, but we need to ensure it's peaceful and organized to avoid giving them any ammunition." Marcus added, "We can coordinate with local organizations and use social media to spread the word. Clara can cover the event to maximize visibility." Their collaborative efforts began to bear fruit as the community united in their pursuit of transparency and accountability. The march was set for the following weekend, a pivotal moment that could either solidify their movement or expose them to further retaliation. The day of the march arrived with clear skies, a symbolic representation of the community's renewed hope. Streets filled with residents carrying signs advocating for transparency, justice, and ethical development. The energy was palpable, a collective determination driving the crowd forward. As Elena and Marcus stood at the forefront, surrounded by supportive allies, Reginald Thompson and Officer Daniels watched from a distance, their expressions tense and wary. The tension between the two factions was unmistakable, the air thick with anticipation of a possible confrontation. The march proceeded smoothly, the crowd chanting slogans and waving banners. Clara Bennett captured every moment, her camera documenting the unity and resilience of the community. However, as the procession reached the town hall, the opposition began to emerge. Thompson and Daniels approached the crowd, their presence causing a ripple of unease. They were flanked by a group of uniformed officers, their expressions stern and unyielding. Thompson stepped forward, addressing the crowd with a forced smile. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your enthusiasm. However, we must remind you that peace and order must be maintained. Any disruptions to the redevelopment project will not be tolerated." Elena felt her blood boil, but maintained her composure. "This march is about ensuring that our community is heard and that developments are carried out ethically. We're not here to disrupt progress, but to advocate for fairness and transparency. Thompson responded with a sneer. Your so-called advocacy is causing unnecessary delays and creating divisions within our community. Crestwood deserves progress, not your misguided activism. The confrontation intensified as Daniel stepped forward, his voice carrying an undercurrent of menace. We urge you all to respect the law and allow the redevelopment to proceed without interference. Before tensions could escalate further, Jasmine stepped between Elena and Thompson, her voice loud and clear. No more silencing. We're here to ensure that our voices are heard and that justice prevails. The crowd erupted in support, their collective voice drowning out the narrow attempts of Thompson and Daniels to assert control. The moment reached a boiling point as the two factions stood face to face, the atmosphere charged with the potential for conflict. As the situation teetered on the edge, Elena felt a surge of internal strength. She knew that maintaining her composure was crucial, not just for herself, but for the community she was fighting to protect. The injustices they faced were not just personal battles, but a reflection of the systemic prejudices embedded within Crestwood's power structures. Determined to steer the situation towards resolution, Elena took a deep breath and stepped forward. This isn't about stopping progress. It's about ensuring that progress is fair and inclusive. We deserve the opportunity to have our voices heard without fear of retribution. Her words resonated with the crowd, their support unwavering. Thompson, sensing the shifting dynamics, attempted to regain control. This is a peaceful demonstration, but remember, disruptions to the redevelopment project will have consequences. Elena met his gaze, her voice unwavering. We are not here to disrupt. We are here to advocate for ethical practices and transparency. Our community deserves nothing less. As the tension reached its peak, Officer Daniels signaled to Thompson and the officers, a silent command that sent a wave of apprehension through the crowd. The potential for violence was palpable, the stakes higher than ever. In that critical moment, Jasmine stepped forward, her presence a symbol of the community's resilience. We won't back down. We'll keep fighting for what's right, and we'll stand together against any attempts to silence us. The room held its breath, the impending confrontation, a testament to the deep-rooted conflicts within Crestwood. Elena and Marcus exchanged a determined glance, their commitment unwavering despite the mounting pressures and systemic biases they faced. Just as the situation seemed poised for an explosive confrontation, the sound of sirens pierced the air, growing louder by the second. A fleet of police cars surrounded the town hall, their flashing lights casting an ominous glow on the scene. Officer Daniels stepped forward, his face contorted with frustration. This march is unauthorized, you're violating public order, and we must disperse immediately. Elena felt a surge of adrenaline, her mind racing with the implications of this escalation. The evidence Jasmine had secured was now under threat, and the community's unity was being tested like never before. Before she could respond, Thompson raised his voice, his tone edged with desperation. We have the right to protest and advocate for our community's best interests. Stand down, or we'll take further action. Elena knew that the situation was spiraling out of control. The stakes had never been higher, and the path forward was fraught with uncertainty and danger. As the crowd hesitated, caught between supporting their leaders and fearing the consequences of defiance, Elena felt the weight of the pivotal moment pressing down on her. In that charged silence, with the fate of Crestwood hanging in the balance, Elena made a silent vow. She would not let systemic corruption and prejudice silence her or her community. The journey toward justice and transparency was far from over, and the battle was about to reach its most critical phase. What will Elena and Marcus do next to protect their community and expose the corruption within Crestwood? Stay tuned for the climactic confrontation that will determine the town's future. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to follow their journey.